All right, buckle up because today we are diving into some seriously outrageous humor with Scary Movie 2, a sequel that definitely takes things to the next level.
That's one way to put it.
Oh, this movie takes Go Big or Go Home and launches it into space.
And they waste absolutely no time setting that tone.
Right off the bat, right.
First scene.
Parodying The Exorcist. I mean, talk about a bold move.
Seriously gutsy filmmaking.
So gutsy. What makes that opening scene work so well as a parody? Because it's not exactly subtle humor.
Not even slightly.
Right.
It's interesting because you are dealing with, arguably, one of the most iconic horror scenes of all time.
For sure.
And instead of shying away from that challenge, they lean right into it and completely flip the script.
Okay, yeah, unpack that a little bit. How do they flip that script? Because we're not dealing with subtle humor.
No, it's about as subtle as a train wreck.
Right.
But that's part of the genius.
Yeah.
They take something so deeply ingrained in our minds as terrifying. The image of Regan possessed, spinning her head, and obliterate it with laughter.
Yeah.
It's shocking,
Yeah.
ridiculous, and it establishes their comedic style right from the start.
Oh, for sure, right. And it sets the tone for what the audience is in for the rest of the movie, basically.
Absolutely.
Because they commit to that tone, right, throughout the entire film.
Oh, yeah.
We have the return of our favorite characters, Cindy, Brenda, Shorty,
Of course.
but their quirks are amplified, like, to the max.
To 11.
Yeah.
Exaggeration is
Yeah.
the name of the game, right?
Yeah.
You look at Cindy, for example, she's got this bad luck in the first one. But in this one, it's like the universe is out to get her.
Yeah.
It's slapstick comedy cranked up to 11.
And it works. I mean, you're laughing even though you know it's ridiculous. You're still laughing at it.
It's so over the top you can't help but laugh.
Exactly. And especially when you throw Shorty into the mix.
Oh, yeah.
That whole, we don't want to give too much away, but his encounter with, we'll just say botanical mishaps.
Botanical mishap, yeah.
Is something you won't forget.
Yeah. It's definitely memorable. That whole sequence is just physical comedy gold.
Visual gags.
It takes such a simple concept, right? A guy, a plant, misunderstanding, and milk it for everything it's worth.
The absurdity. I'm here for it.
You almost have to admire the audacity.
Almost. I'm there. I'm fully on board the audacity train.
Speaking of audacity.
Let's talk about the haunted house.
Oh, yeah.
Such a classic horror setting.
Classic.
Ripe with potential.
So much potential.
Did they live up to that potential, or did they just totally go in a different direction?
Oh, they went all in. But in their own way.
Right, of course.
You've got the creepy mansion, the mysterious noises,
Yeah.
even a creepy butler with a rather, shall we say, memorable hand.
Let's not forget Hanson.
Oh, we can't forget Hansa.
Right. I mean, he's like a walking, talking, collection of everything that makes you want to sleep with the lights on.
Absolutely.
Between the disturbing appearance, the questionable culinary skills, don't eat the food, and that hand.
That hand.
Right.
Just wrong.
He's like the embodiment of Scary Movie 2's approach to humor. Take something unsettling, right? Add a dash of the absurd.
A big dash.
And then just sprinkle it with cringe-worthy moments.
Liberally.
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head. Henson is the microcosm of the entire film.
He really is a perfect example of how Scary Movie 2 works on these different levels.
Yes.
He's creepy, he's funny, and he's just plain wrong.
Yes. And you can't look away.
You can't.
Wrong.
No matter how much you want to.
And that's Scary Movie 2 in a nutshell.
That's the Scary Movie 2 effect.
And it's not just him. That whole house, that whole setting becomes like a playground for all these visual gags and physical comedy.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Ray's encounter with the clown under the bed, for example.
Yeah.
That's not something you see every day.
You think you know what to expect, right? Like, oh, creepy clown under the bed, here we go, classic.
Right, exactly.
But then they just totally flip it on its head.
It's ridiculous and unexpected. I love it.
And that's what makes it work, I think, that unexpectedness. Even when it's absurd, it just works.
Right. So we've talked about the exaggeration, the physical humor, the absurdity, but there's another layer to this movie that we have to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
The cultural references, it's like a who's who of horror movies.
They throw in everything, not even just horror.
Action movies, pop culture, everything from the past 2 decades at least.
It's like they put it all in a blender and said, let's see what happens.
Exactly. So, okay, let's break that down a little bit
Okay.
because some of these references are really clever.
Some of them are very clever.
Like the haunted house itself.
Oh, yeah, good point.
You got nods to the haunting. You've got Poltergeist, but it's all blended in this crazy way, you know?
It's like a love letter to horror, but like a twisted, demented love letter.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're in on the joke, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
You feel like you're part of a secret club.
Exactly, exactly. But do any of the references fall flat for you? Like where it's just like, okay, that was a little too much.
I think, yeah, I mean, there are a few where it's like they were trying a little too hard to
Yeah.
like shoehorn it in there, you know?
Yeah.
Like the Charlie's Angels scene, for
Oh,
example.
yeah. Yeah.
Visually, very cool, but narratively, I don't know.
Doesn't really add much.
It's funny, but it's not like essential, you know?
Yeah, it's like, all right, we get it. You've seen Charlie's Angels. We get it.
Exactly.
So it's about finding that balance, right? Between like paying homage to these classic films,
Right.
but also creating something original and funny.
It can't just be a checklist of references.
Right.
There has to be some like substance to it.
Yes.
You know?
Okay, but does this type of humor age well? Because we're talking about a movie that's, well, it's a product of its time.
Oh, for sure. It's a time capsule, for
Yeah.
better or for worse.
Right. It's like those gross out comedies, do they really hold up?
It's like looking back at an old comedy sketch show.
Yes, exactly.
Some of it's funny, some of it you're like, oof, maybe not.
Maybe not. So where do you think Scary Movie 2 falls on that spectrum?
I think it's a mixed bag, honestly.
Yeah.
Like there are definitely jokes that would absolutely bomb today.
Right.
But then there are others where it's like, wow, that still works.
It transcends somehow.
Yeah, and for people who grew up with it,
What
it's
is on it?
nostalgic, you know?
Like comfort food.
It's like, ooh, Scary Movie 2, I remember that. Good times.
Yes.
Even if it's a little cringy.
Even if it's a little cringy. Okay.
Right.
But when we like peel back all the layers, right? All the jokes, the references,
Yeah.
is there anything left?
Is there any
Or
substance?
is it just like a big, explosion of absurdity?
It's a good question.
Right?
And I actually think there's more to it than meets the eye.
Okay.
Because for all the craziness, Scary Movie 2 actually taps into something kind of universal.
Okay.
Our love-hate relationship with fear.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, think about it. The whole horror genre, it preys on our deepest fears.
Right.
Our anxieties, our nightmares.
Right. Exactly.
Scary Movie 2 takes those fears, all those classic tropes, the creepy house, the possessed person, the monster under the bed,
Yeah.
and it makes us laugh at them.
Oh, so it's like by laughing at it,
Yeah.
we're almost like taking the power away from those fears
Yeah.
a little bit.
Exactly. It's a form of catharsis.
Yeah.
We confront these anxieties,
Yeah.
but in this safe, controlled environment where we can actually laugh at them.
Right.
We're not just passively watching the horror, we're engaging with it
Yeah.
on a different level.
It's like it's okay to laugh at the things that scare us.
It is. And this movie gives you permission to do that.
It's true. So after this deep dive, where do you think you land on Scary Movie 2?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
I mean, it's definitely a product of its time.
Yeah.
Some of it hasn't aged well, but there's still something about it.
Yeah.
It's just so wildly entertaining.
There's a certain charm to it, I think.
Yeah, it's like that friend who tells embarrassing stories at parties.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
It's cringy, but you can't help but laugh.
You're like, oh no, don't tell that story. But you kind of want them to.
Exactly. And that's Scary Movie 2. It's a wild ride. It's messy. It's outrageous.
Absolutely.
But it's also pretty unforgettable.
And on that note, I think we should probably wrap up this deep dive into Scary Movie 2.
Yeah.
We've covered it all.
All base.
From the ridiculous humor to the cultural references and even the psychology of fear.
It's been quite the journey.
It has.
But remember, folks, just because we're done talking about it doesn't mean the conversation have to end.
True.
Think about it. Would this movie have the same impact today? Would it be celebrated or censored?
So many questions.
So many questions.
Food for thought. Well, that's it for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another one.
Until then, stay curious.